everyone. I'm Kareem Rae, your host at the One Soccer Nation podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Michael Lahoud, who is a former MLS soccer player and now a CBS Sports analyst. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I think if you'd asked me that at 4 o'clock this morning when I got up for my shift, I would have had a different answer. But no, I feel really, really fortunate to even have half of those things that you just introduced me as part of my resume.
Absolutely. Huge accomplishments. I'm super excited to be interviewing you today, especially with the introduction that I got to you. So super excited. Um, with saying that, the first question I have that is one of my favorite questions to ask is how'd you get involved in the beautiful game?
It's always been a part of my family. And I think the more that I encounter stories from relatives and from loved ones, soccer was something that it was a match made in heaven. So the joke in my family is that I was literally born with a ball coming out of the womb. Um, it's always been my first love. And coming from West Africa, soccer was pretty much what I knew. And it was one of the constants throughout my life. So, it was just soccer has always been there.
Absolutely. So can you just share a little bit of the country that you were born in? You know, you mentioned a little bit of you were born with the ball right at your feet and how you came over to the US and signed your first professional contract. I know it's probably a little bit,
Yeah.
it'd be a great story.
No, I was born in Freetown, Sierra Leone. For those watching, if you don't know where Sierra Leone is, think of where you go in Africa from Morocco, go down the coast, you get to Senegal, go a little bit more, and right when Africa starts hooking around the corner, it's one of the smallest countries, about the size of Rhode Island and the state of Connecticut put together. And I grew up in a small village on they call it the East End, so the east side of Sierra Leone. And Sierra Leone, Freetown, I should say, is divided into three parts. So you have the West End, downtown, their city center, and the East End. So I was a country boy. And in the country, we loved our soccer. We played it every day. I was really, really fortunate to have a lot of those fond memories of leaving school, coming home, and playing. A lot of that changed, and all that changed when I was 6 years old, where civil war broke out in Sierra Leone and really broke out starting in Liberia and made its way through Sierra Leone. And I was, it was just a lottery that, the UN and President Bill Clinton at the time, they were giving lottery visas to young children of war from Sierra Leone, Liberia. And my number was called. And so because my number was called at a certain day at a certain time, the ramifications were you had to leave immediately. So in the middle of school, my grandma burst through the door, grabbed my hand, and we were off. We went back to my village, in our village, packed up all my stuff, and I was gone that same day. So everything happened really fast for me to go from a young boy in West Africa to, in the blink of an eye, I'm on a plane, and now I'm in the United States of America. And both my parents, they'd already gone ahead, and irrespective of the war, they'd already moved to the States. So here I am spending most of my childhood up to that point, not really knowing my parents. And now I'm face to face with two people who internally I could connect with. They were my parents, but they kind of felt like strangers.
Hmm.
And over time, there were things that started becoming familiar and things from our culture. And one of them was soccer. So at the time in the DC area, you have this influx of immigrants that were coming in from West Africa because of the war. And so that gave me a massive sense of home, seeing people that looked like me, seeing people that spoke our language. And when I got on the field, all that sense of being a foreigner went away because soccer was this great equalizer. It didn't matter what language you spoke, as long as you understood the language of soccer, you belonged. And there was this desire to belong to something bigger then my story, then my limitations, then my limitations of English, then my limitations of being new, then my limitations of trying to figure out where I even was in the United States of America, what that even meant to be an immigrant. And for now, we'd say the 90 minutes. Growing up, it was 60 minutes, then became 80 minutes. But for those 90 minutes throughout my childhood, life was good. And it was the rest of life of assimilating that was really hard. And so I rose through the ranks through soccer, started out playing club soccer at Bradley Grove Youth Club, and that became Western Football Club. And I got a scholarship offer from Wake Forest University. I didn't know anything about college. I just knew that it was kind of the thing that Americans did. um, and then Major League Soccer was pretty brand new. It was probably maybe 10 years into its infancy at the time, but there weren't that many young people in our neighborhood, in our area, becoming professional soccer players. And I had so many influences throughout my childhood, but it was turning on the TV, having access to soccer through leagues like the Champions League, and seeing people from all around the world that I think took me from each level, to success.
Wow, that is the best story. I heard one of the best stories that I have to archive now because
Yeah.
the the piece that I love is that the game brought peace, love, and fun in those 90 minutes, and it's something that was familiar to you. And then the rest of the time remaining was something that you had to work for to transition and adjust to the new country that you were living in.
Yeah.
And like, it's just such a very unique story. And, you have to be a very extremely strong person, a hardworking person to get where you are today. And like, again, I mean, just the point of the lottery and, the opportunity to come to the US, and it just, wow, it's just so,
Yeah.
like I just think about God immediately,
Yeah.
you know, wow, wow, wow. So, I
Yeah.
mean, first of all, I just want to thank you for sharing that because that's such an amazing story and it really touches me. Um, with saying that, what did that, like all these different challenges that you had to deal with being in a new country, and then obviously soccer being that vehicle to be that safe space for you to shine and become the star that you did, what the hard things that you had to go through, how did those things help build you as a character, person, and strengthen you on the field?
That's a really good question. So growing up, there was a sense of drivenness that I had. And I think a lot of that drivenness I probably get from my mom. She's a very driven person. And there was in 90% of life, there was this sense of you have to get an education. You have to take advantage of the opportunity to be here. You have to get good grades. And those who are African or of African descent or grew up in African families and grow up in African families or immigrant families, there is a sense of pressure that you live with as a child of your parents sacrificed a lot to get the entire family to this country, this land of opportunity. You have to realize your American dream and theirs. The one place that pressure, I never felt that was soccer. And I'm so grateful that that was my Zen zone. That was my safe place because that was my therapy. That was my place of certainty. And I didn't know what my limit was. It was this untapped, unknown frontier, this infinite frontier that I just had my head like this, constantly looking towards. I wonder which mountain I could climb. And throughout the way, there were setbacks. And my first setback that I learned from, that when you talk about character building moments, was when I was 15 years old, I think 14 or 15. There was this program called the Olympic Development Team. And at CBS Sports, I actually worked with one of my former ODP teammates in Charlie Davies. Charlie is the person I've known the longest in the soccer world. And we always joke around about that. I'm like, wow, we've known each other since we were like 11, 12 years old. This is crazy. We're almost 40 years old. And from the team, the first time that someone told me in a safe place, in a safe space that was always felt like this place of destiny, you're not good enough to be on this team. You're not good enough. You're too small. All these things that reminded me of life outside of soccer. You are below this line of what's deemed acceptable. And it impacted my confidence so much. And there is a feeling of debilitation almost of, I don't know how I move forward. And I feel immense gratitude that I had different people, almost like guardian angels along the way. And I'm a big believer, and as a believer, that people come into your life for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. As a young man, I had so many different people that came into their life for different seasons for monumental reasons. And the first person was my former teammate, Kyle Allen. He went to Fairfax High School, and I haven't thought about any of this stuff for a long time. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm naming all these people, but they deserve to be named. When that happened, I spent summers at Kyle's house, and we'd go on these soccer trips and everything. And that summer, Kyle had this goal set up in his yard. Him and his dad, they worked with me on just enjoying the game again. And we just played. We would play and pretend that we were our biggest soccer heroes. And for me, it was like, I'm Thierry Henry. I'm the original Ronaldo. I'm Zidane. I'm this person. And that joy and reconnecting with the joy of the beautiful game, the next phase of my high school career, ODP was the last thing on my mind. All of a sudden, I loved the game again. I had belief that I could do something through the game again. And that's when the next setback came, which was having success and the roller coaster going up, and then the experience of defeat in the state championship of high school soccer as a senior. And that was a different experience of setback because I really cared about something bigger than my own story and bigger than my own journey, because it was the last soccer game I was ever going to play with my high school friends. And I wanted to win that for them and make history for our school in a way that hadn't been done in a long time. And so it taught me a lesson of how do you pick yourself up when you've experienced disappointment on a big scale? Is there a tomorrow? Is the world coming to an end? And my teammates, they all said something to me that I'll never forget, which was, this is probably the end of the road when it comes to playing high competitive soccer for a lot of us. Make sure that wherever you go next, make sure that you do right by the talent that you have. And I didn't really realize how significant that was, that I had a possibility to go to a level that a lot of people didn't have a chance to go to, and a lot of people closest to me. And it was being on kind of that road less traveled. I started really feeling the weight of that, but I felt ready, and because of their love and support. And so what didn't happen as a senior in high school ended up manifesting itself and happening as a junior in college, where we won the national championship with Wake Forest. And that was such an honor. It's one of the greatest honors of my professional life, well, amateur life, but soccer career, because I chose to go to Wake Forest University to make history. And it was the first time that I believed that I could do something that had never done before with a group of people, teammates, and college teammates that have become lifelong friends. And so throughout that, and even as in my professional endeavors, there's been so many people along the way that have helped me navigate kind of the uncharted waters, geez, that shows that I've lived in Philadelphia when I say that, but uncharted waters of what could be.
Absolutely. Those people are key and important to guiding us to the right, on keeping us on the right path and keeping us focused for sure. Those are always amazing people to have in our corner. Um, with saying that, from college, how'd you tap into the pro space?
So that funny, I was having a conversation with this with a couple of my college teammates. We met for dinner to have a going away party for our mutual friend Lyle, who's now living abroad with his wife in Central Europe. And I always had the dream of becoming a professional soccer player, but I didn't know if it would happen for me.
Mm.
There was this feeling of being destined for something, but I didn't know how high I could go. And once again, I didn't know where the frontier really was. And so after we won the national championship our junior year, we took a trip to Brazil that spring. And I think it was late spring of 2008. And I think the Olympics were happening that summer. And some guy that we heard about named Lionel Messi was going to be there. He's done all right with his career last time I checked. But we went to Brazil, and Brazil is there's a reason why they have the most World Cups. I mean, they have a love affair with soccer that I've never seen before. And probably the closest thing is from that passion meets ability meets soccer festival experience is probably Argentina. And so when we got to Brazil, we went to a game in Sao Paulo for a club called Corinthians. And Corinthians and Sao Paulo, they're eternal rivals. And so I got to see the original Ronaldo, or maybe he didn't come back yet. So I got to see players like Willian, who came through the academy, the youth system at Corinthians, and ended up doing a lot of big things in the Premier League with the likes of Chelsea, Arsenal, etc. And after the game, Corinthians, I think they drew, and they were trying to get back into the top division in Brazil. And so we got off the bus, and fans were going ballistic. And this one fan, as I get off the bus, runs up to me, and he starts screaming some guy's name called Abuda. I'd never heard of Abuda in my life. And within an instant, this group of people just whoop, surrounded our bus. And they started cheering and doing all these cheers. And they thought I was this Brazilian soccer legend named Abuda.
Wow.
And apparently I looked like him. Apparently I did something that was reminiscent of him. And maybe it was something with how I looked and my hair at the time. And it was unlike anything I'd experienced in terms of a group of people, fans, coming to celebrate you, coming to adore you because you represent something that's a part of their club. You represent this sense of glory and a reminder of the glory days of their club. And that was such an electrifying feeling that I remember going back. And I went back to school and I would journal my notebook. And that was a moment where I said, I want to become a professional footballer. For the remainder of my time, for this last semester in college, I'm willing to put the extra work. I'm willing to focus, work on my diet, things I never thought about before. Sorry, coach. I wish I did before, but things I never really committed to in a wholesome way. That was my crossing the Rubicon and going down towards Rome. And a few months later, I got the phone call that I was going to get drafted in Major League Soccer, and the rest kind of unfolded.
Wow. So that moment gave you the superpower that fueled you.
Yeah, that was it. It was experiencing soccer culture in a way that hadn't been tapped into yet in the United States. And you'd gotten flashpoints of watching MLS Cups when the U.S. men's national team had a quarterfinal run in the 2002 World Cup. Those were moments that pushed me along. But being in Brazil and seeing football is the new religion, that was when everything clicked.
What country has a stronger football culture in your perspective? The UK?
Oof. A happier football culture, Brazil, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a tough one. The UK has a richer football history as a whole. They invented the game. So football permeates everything in life there. But for Brazilians, there's just this celebration of the game that makes me smile. And when you witness it, it reminds you of everything beautiful about the beautiful game. It's where the beautiful game comes from. The UK has the game of football, but in Brazil, you have the beautiful game. And I kind of tip it towards the Brazilians, and having a couple trophies in the trophy cabinets and not a lot of dust as the UK has in their trophy cabinet kind of makes me say that. So
Sure. Could you share, a little bit about the moment of the phone call, like, uh, like how you felt, were you expecting it, and just a little story on that?
yeah, so I just graduated college, and during my time at Wake Forest, you never know what you're really doing as a young adult, and I had no clue what we were doing. We had been to the Final Four 3 out of my 4 years. We won a national championship 1 of those 4 years. We probably should have won 3 out of 4 national championships if we go back and look at the tapes, and but it didn't happen that way. But we were one of the more memorable college soccer sides during our tenure in those 4 years, or 3.5 years technically. So I get back home, and I had this feeling that there was opportunity on the horizon. I'd had meetings when I was in school with my coach, and he just said, just be patient. And right around Christmas, I think it was Christmas Eve, I get this phone call from a number I'd never seen. And it's an agent. And he said, "Hi, I'd like to call about representing you in the professional soccer world." So I'm like, okay. And he said, "And if you would like to work with me as your agent, I actually have a contract with me from Major League Soccer. MLS has expressed interest in signing you. And so what do you say?" I heard the words a bit, and it was almost one of those moments where I wanted to say, "Oh, okay, thanks. Hold on a sec. Let me give the phone to the person you're actually talking to." And so I just, out of body experience, heard myself talking, but I felt so disconnected from the moment because it's the holidays and you hear your name. And mind you, I never had anyone in my immediate sphere of influence that had kind of walked that journey in our area. And I had people who had gone to college. I knew of people just through our playing circles, playing college soccer, who had taken the next step. But when it's your name and when your number is called, for me, it was pretty surreal. And so I went, and I told the agent at the time, "Hey, can I think about it? I'm really excited. Can I think about it?" So I went and told my buddies after Christmas, and they were all stoked. They were like, "What?" And so they were like, "What'd you tell him?" And I was like, I told him I'll think about it. And they were like, "Are you kidding me?" So my childhood best friend, Jack Wolf, amazing guy. I owe him so much in life. He invested in me. Him and my buddies I grew up with invested in me. And for the next 3 weeks, they took me out to this open field in this rec center called Wakefield Rec Center. And they put me through a mini preseason.
Mm.
And we trained, we ran, we did fitness, we did weights. Almost, they were pretty much my personal trainers. And these are my buddies I grew up with, right? So I got in even better shape than I could have imagined. And after the New Year's, I get this other phone call that says, "Hey, we're with Major League Soccer, and we'd like to invite you to the MLS Combine down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida." I was a bit less shell-shocked because of the news of the contract. But when I got that phone call, I knew I was the most fit player, and I knew I was the most ready player to take advantage and seize the opportunity of what was next. And when I got down to the combine, that's probably the first time I connected with the fact that, and there's a saying that I'm going to botch, but the gist of it is that if you put in the work, it gives you the confidence when it's time to actually perform.
Yeah.
And I remember there. I think the saying that is coming back to me is, I think, I don't know if it's Anson Dorrance, but Anson Dorrance, who North Carolina, University of North Carolina Tar Heel legend, both men's and women's soccer, and U.S. women's soccer national team legend as well. He would always talk about how a champion acts and a champion responds, and you'd always say that the champion puts in the work when no one is looking. And so no one knew what I was doing in the offseason. No one knew what I was doing around the holidays, but I did. And because I knew how much I suffered during that time to go the extra mile, I knew I was going to have a good combine. And instead of a good combine, I had a great combine. And that moved my stock up from maybe being at best a second round pick, maybe a third round pick, to becoming a first round pick and having teams, managers like Bruce Arena and different people picking up the phone and calling and saying, "Hey, we want you on our team."
Wow. So from there, what was the first team that who was the first team that you got signed to? And then could you, in order, just name all the teams that you played in MLS and then in all, any other leagues?
Yeah, so first team I ended up signing for was Chivas USA, and my manager was Preki at the time, and he's an MLS legend and US soccer legend. I think he still manages an assistant for the Seattle Sounders, has had a ton of success and learned a lot from him. Next manager up, or managers up, was I got traded to the Philadelphia Union after almost 4 seasons with Chivas. And my first manager was Peter Novak, who won an MLS Cup with DC United, I think in '04, and another MLS soccer legend. And Peter was there for a short time, then got coached by John Hackworth and Jim Curtin, who's now the current coach of the Union. And then I had this wild idea to leave Major League Soccer. And not a lot of people were doing it at the time. And I left MLS and moved to the New York Cosmos and was managed by a manager who's had a ton of success in Major League Soccer and a former MLS player in Giovanni Savarese. And Gio he is one of those managers that he's a player's coach. You play for Gio because you want to. Everyone buys in when they play for him because he just reminds you to enjoy the game. And from there, I thought I was going to be with Gio for 3 seasons. I was with him for 4 months, if that. And I moved from the New York Cosmos to an expansion team called Miami FC. And when I got to Miami, I didn't really know much about the manager or what was happening down in South Florida, but that's where I became a student of the game. And I was managed by the great Alessandro Nesta, who played for Milan, has won everything just about that you can in the game, and won the World Cup with Italy in 2006, and is part of that golden generation in Italy. And he taught me what the game is truly about and to be a student of the game. From Miami, I moved to FC Cincinnati, and that's where I became a leader and learned about leadership. And then in 2019, I finished my career in San Antonio. That was the last year I played competitively. I was thinking about playing one more year, but 2 things happened. I met my wife and COVID. And when I met my wife, I knew that I'd finally met someone or something that I loved more than soccer. So it was time.
Wow, that's amazing. So I
Yeah.
just want to confirm, San Antonio is an MLS team, right?
They were in the USL Championship. So when I left Miami and moved to Cincinnati, that's when I moved from NASL so I went MLS, NASL, USL, and then finished. So Chivas and Philly, MLS, New York and Miami NASL, and then Cincinnati and San Antonio USL Championship.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you got to experience different leagues. Um, there's so many questions, but I want to
Yeah.
ask, what like what's your number one memory that comes to mind that was your most favorite in your whole career? First one that comes to mind.
Ah, there's nothing like when you win something. And I have this image of it in my mind of lifting a trophy. And when I was at Cincinnati, and I'm surprised Miami doesn't come up immediately, but when I was at Cincinnati, I'd gone through a bit of turmoil in Miami where the league, the NASL had folded. So all of us became free agents overnight. We come from this championship caliber team in the NASL, and then your league folds and you start having this kind of realization of, oh my gosh, my career could be over before I know it. What do I do? And Cincinnati took a chance on me and also took a chance on a couple of my teammates from Miami. And from the moment we got there, it felt like this all-star team. And for 6 months, it was such a unique experience because we all could have showed up and been disgruntled by what happened with the NASL, but instead there was a feeling of gratitude for one more chance to play this game. And we ended up setting a then USL record for points in the season. We smashed every USL record at the time. And there was this extra motivation of being part of a team that was going to be an MLS expansion team. So we were all trying out for the MLS side for the following year. But it was when we won the regular season championship and seeing the entire city of Cincinnati show out to Nippert Stadium, which is where the University of Cincinnati play. We felt like rock stars. And the trophy hoist, the celebration, but the entire city falling in love with you, that took me all the way back to Brazil of my why. It came full circle. It was like, oh my gosh, I am 21 years old all over again, re-experiencing this magical moment.
Wow. All right. So I wanna ask you,
Hmm.
and thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you before we transition to the transition from on the field to off the field, is what advice do you have for up and coming players, the next generation that want to go pro, especially the ones that are coming from overseas to the US or from players that are
Hmm.
US to overseas?
It's twofold. One is don't lose sight of the thing that made you get involved in the game, which is your love for the game. Whenever I lost my way, whether it be as a youth or as a college athlete or as a professional athlete, that was my getting back to center. It's why do you play this game? Never forget the answer to that. For me, it was for the love of the game. That is why I do what I do now. And that is my North Star when it comes to sport, is the love of the game. I have this love affair with soccer. I'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning to watch a compelling game that has a compelling story. I love this game, and I plan on loving this game for the rest of my days. The second advice would be that you never know the opportunity you have until it's gone. And so there were these moments of becoming awake to something significant that I'm so grateful for along the way. And there are people that will come into your path, that will come into your story especially for players coming from overseas, where there's this heightened pressure of I'm coming all the way across the pond to seize this opportunity. It might be the last person you expect that will drop this pearl of wisdom along the way. That's the thing that's going to take you to the next level. That's the thing that's going to take you to where you want to go. It may not. It may be your coach. It may be the mailman. It may be your roommate. It may be someone that's never played the ball before. But just be open to receiving help and receiving wisdom and just receiving from others, because there's so many people I can pinpoint that helped me along the way. And when you get that opportunity, honor that, honor your ability, honor the help you've received by being responsible and doing the work. So if my buddies after college had said, hey, let's go through this mini preseason, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to bed, I wouldn't have made it. If Kyle Allen and his dad had said, hey, come over and let's kick that ball. Now, when I was going through just that letdown of getting cut from the ODP team, I wouldn't have made it. And I said, I'm going to go to the beach. I wouldn't have made it. Those were these massive points of interest that as a young man and as a young athlete, I didn't know where it was going to lead to, but it was a moment of significance. So be open to your moment of significance and seize it when it's time. Like, we all have them in our lives, and I was fortunate that I was present for mine.
Great points. All right, so this is a perfect transition for you mentioned COVID, which we don't hear about anymore.
Yeah.
You mentioned COVID, and 2019 was your last year that you played.
Yeah.
So, obviously you've had a very impressive playing career across MLS, the NASL, and USL. What's been the most challenging aspect of transitioning from being on the fields to analyzing the game from the studio? And how has your experience as a player influenced your approach as a soccer analyst now at CBS Sports?
So the toughest thing, and I'll answer the first part first, the toughest thing about transitioning from an athlete to anything is you are forced to answer a question that the further you go in sports, you're forced to avoid. Is without this ball, without this racket, without this whatever that instrument of success is in your sport, without this ball at my feet, who am I? And for 12 years, I didn't have to answer that. And there were moments where I got to tap into that. When COVID came, we were all forced to look at ourselves in a way and look internally in a way that we weren't before, and deal with our inner selves. So that was a journey in its own. And the one constant that I could go back to is I am a curious, passionate, adventurous, and just fill in the blank with a whole lot of other things. But that passion, that curiosity, that sense of adventure, committed, discipline, all those things were things that I didn't realize that I could still fill in the blank with who I was as a soccer player. So I had the discipline to get up at a certain time, to go do workouts in the off season. I had the passion that I picked up from places I went and people I met. I had the curiosity of how much further can I go? How much better can I get? Well, those same things apply to broadcasting. And the one aspect of broadcasting that I'm grateful for, that I'm able to bring from my soccer playing days to now, is being a student of the game. Those moments where you watch film as a team, as a player, you are watching film as a soccer player, or as a broadcaster. The difference is you're watching film of yourself and someone else who's your opponent. As a broadcaster, you also watch film of yourself, and how can you get better? How can you get more polished? How do you inflect in certain areas? What does your posture look like? Things that in some ways you don't do as much, where you're talking about the mechanics of things as an athlete when you're playing, but you're still talking about mechanics of what's your presence like on the field, what's your presence like in the studio or in the booth. So there's things that you can transfer from one craft to the other, but being a student of the game, that still remains.
100%. That's a great point. 100%. So, okay, so there's so many other pathways. There's coaching, scouting,
Yeah.
strength and conditioning coach, agent. So many different paths that you could have chose. Why broadcasting?
It's a really good question. I knew when I was playing and the moments I thought about life after soccer, I never really came alive thinking about coaching. And I say that is my first job I did after retirement was coaching. So never say never. But I was never 100% committed to that's what I want to do. And we all have friends who, growing up or at a certain point, you look at them and you're like, that person's going to be a coach. They just have that coach's presence about them, that obsession with coaching and looking at the game from a managerial standpoint. My connection to coaching was I am passionate about the development of young athletes and young adults. Being a former young adult myself, being a young adult at heart at times, personal growth and development matters to me because I experienced my own personal growth and development. And that's what's helped and allowed me to do what I do and continue to grow. Once again, it was different people who, when I retired, illuminated the pathway. And I love storytelling, if you can't tell. I love telling a story of my love for the beautiful game and trying to encourage and invite people into why people in this country should fall in love with the beautiful game as well. And so when I was playing, I didn't realize that in my spare time, I was involved in media. I was doing studio appearances. I was doing podcast appearances, and it never felt like work. It was fun. I never took myself seriously in it, but it felt like an extension of myself. And so when I put the mic down for the first time and I said something, it felt like a natural fit. And it felt that way when I was a player. It felt that way when I'd give speeches. And it still feels that way when I'm in studio or in front of a camera. It's an opportunity to tell a story. And so I love what I do.
It always comes back to love for the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm interested to know, was it straight off the bat CBS Sports, or was it a different company? And then how did you get to CBS? How many companies in between before CBS Sports?
Yeah. People I think people oftentimes see the glitz of someone's rise and they don't see the behind the scenes. So yeah, once again, the hard work behind the scenes. So when I retired and I knew I wanted to get into broadcasting, the question that I would say was, how do you get into sports and sports broadcasting when the world is shut down and there is no sports on TV? So that was a bit humbling. So podcasting became the phenomenon. And a former teammate and mentor of mine, Jimmy Conrad, I reached out to him and he had this platform called the Soccer Minute, where I was thrown in the deep end of sports media, where you had the opportunity to come up with content of any storyline around the world, and you had to record for 1 minute. So now you have your own equipment, and he would send you equipment, but you had to get your own mic and all these different things just to have skin in the game. And through that, I learned how to write. I learned how to produce. I learned how to be on camera. I learned how to edit. And I learned how to just be with myself for 1 minute and to be concise. So I started off with Jimmy on his Soccer Minute team. And then from that, I ended up working with um, geez, it's gonna bother me with a podcast group from Cincinnati. They're gonna be so annoyed that I forgot this. It'll come to me at a different time. Maybe we can edit that and put that in there. But it was just fans that created this podcast, and it was so cool because their love for the game. Cincy Soccer Talk. Thank you. Gosh, I would have been so annoyed if I forgot that.
You go.
Cincy Soccer Talk. It was awesome. It was just a bunch of fans who wanted their voice to be heard, giving it from a fan's perspective. And I was the first former player who came on and was part of the staff. And so once or twice a week, we'd react to games, we'd analyze games. And that was my first experience being an analyst. From that, I went and got an opportunity to apply for the head analyst job at Austin FC. So I'd never done a full match before, but from Cincy Soccer Talk, in preparation for applying for the job with Austin FC, my first broadcast gig as an analyst was actually the Longhorn Network through ESPN, covering University of Texas women's games in 2020. And then from there, I applied for the head analyst role for Austin FC and was the youngest person, most inexperienced person that put their name through the application process, and I got the job. So I was with the club from its expansion year and worked with them for 3 years. And I learned from one of the just icons of broadcasting, soccer broadcasting in this country, Adrian Healy. And during my time with Austin, he taught me the ins and outs and everything. And just that love affair with the game that he has, I really picked up on that. From Austin, while I was working with them, I started doing podcast work for CBS Sports with this platform called Que Golazo. And that's where we tapped in the international game, where we had interviews with Sadio Mane when he was at Liverpool and winning the African Cup of Nations, and different people that you're just like, whoa, okay, this is kind of cool. But that was my first introduction to CBS. And then last summer, the Golazo Network reached out to me. And that was when I first went on air in studio and did my first ever morning footy. And when I got in the studio, had no clue what I was going to say, but I just knew that there was a sense of I belonged. And the rest so far is history.
Nice. I've heard about Kid Golasso. I've only seen one clip, short clip. Shout out to our advisor, Fred Mathis. He shared it with me. He had sent over a kit to Charlie Davis.
Oh, no way. Yeah.
Annapolis Blues FC. And then
Annapolis.
Yeah.
No way. I saw him wear that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the team that Fred's currently working with. And
That's awesome.
it was so cool. So I got to see the clips on now. After this interview, I'm going to look back, watch some more. I haven't watched any of your soccer clips. I'm going to check out some of your soccer clips, check out some Golasso interviews, and do a deeper dive for sure. So no, this is super cool. But to end off, I want to ask you some fun questions.
Okay.
I got three. We'll do three rapid fire ones.
Okay.
So the first one is Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi.
What are your thoughts on Messi in the U.S. Playing for Inter Miami?
It's surreal. If you'd have told me that in our lifetime we would see arguably the greatest player ever play the game come and play in Major League Soccer after winning a World Cup, I'd have said you're crazy. It's life-changing for soccer in this country.
100%. And the last one is, what are your thoughts on the upcoming 2026 FIFA World Cup?
I'm obsessed. I'm over the moon. I can't wait for people to fall in love with this game like all of us soccer junkies do and have. I think this is the second coming of the game in this country.
100%. It's going to be so impactful. It's going to be huge. So I'll leave it at that. Michael, again, one of the top stories for me that I'll remember for a long time. But I really appreciate you taking the time being on the One Soccer Nation podcast and sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kareem, and thank you for what you do, and thank you for allowing people like me and different people to share their stories. I think this is really cool and needed.
Thank you.